For 17 years, every fourth Thursday of the month, a plain brown package arrived at Franklin Moore's doorstep. No return address, no markings, always at exactly 9 a.m. He never opened them, not once. He just carried them to the basement, placed them neatly on the shelf marked 19, and locked the door behind him. Neighbors thought it was some quirky routine, an old man stuck in his ways, maybe a collector, maybe just lonely. But Franklin had been a military intelligence officer, the kind who didn't forget patterns, the kind who knew that silence often screamed the loudest. The packages stopped coming on a gray February morning, but someone else showed up instead, a teenage girl with frostbitten cheeks and eyes too tired for her age. She held no box, just a folded piece of paper. And the moment Franklin read it, he realized the past hadn't been buried at all. It had only been waiting. You're watching Echo Stories, true inspired tales about forgotten heroes, hidden pasts, and moments that echo across generations. If this story captures your curiosity, subscribe now. There's a whole world of silence we're just beginning to break. Franklin Moore lived at the end of Pine Hollow Road, in a weather-worn house wrapped in ivy and memory. The mailbox was rusted, the porch steps sagged. And yet, every fourth Thursday, the same delivery van rumbled up the gravel path and left a small, plain brown package at his door. No return address, no barcode, just a number written in black ink on the bottom, 19. He'd pick it up without a word, carry it inside, and disappear into the basement for no more than 5 minutes. Then he'd return, make a pot of coffee, and sit on his front porch like nothing happened. Franklin's neighbors had long stopped asking questions. "Old Man Moore's just weird," they'd say at the local diner. Probably some subscription to government rations or apocalypse beans. No one really knew about his past, not the bronze star tucked away in a shoebox, not the drawer filled with redacted files, not the scars he never talked about. He hadn't served in a combat unit. Franklin had worked in analysis and logistics, paperwork behind the pain, he used to say. But those papers moved people, lives, secrets. And somewhere along the way, one of those secrets must have followed him home. He just never knew which one. On the morning the package didn't arrive, Franklin knew something was wrong before he opened the door. There was no tire track on the snow, no thermos cup on the porch, no scuff marks where the box usually sat, just silence. And then, footsteps. Light, hesitant, crunching snow. He turned slowly, expecting maybe a neighbor's kid or a lost delivery man. Instead, a girl stood at the edge of his porch. She couldn't have been older than 16. Her coat was too thin for the weather. She had a red beanie pulled low, and her nose was pink from the cold. "You're late," Franklin said flatly. "I'm not the delivery," the girl replied. Her voice cracked at the edges. I'm her daughter." Franklin's chest tightened. "Whose daughter?" "The woman who used to bring these," she said, reaching into her coat. "My mom. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should come here and give you this." She held out a folded piece of paper. It was old, creased, and smelled faintly of tobacco. Franklin took it, his fingers trembling as they unfolded the letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. There were only 2 lines. "They know what's in 19. Burn it. Before it finds you first." He stared at the paper for a long time. Then he looked back at the girl. "What's your name?" "Eliza," she whispered. "My mom. Her name was Nora. I think she was scared. She stopped sleeping. She locked her phone in the freezer. She said she was being watched." Franklin's mouth was dry. "She worked for a contractor?" "She never told me who. Only that she used to run errands for people like you." That night, Franklin sat in the basement for hours, staring at the rows of boxes. Parcel 19, 19 years, 19 packages, all unopened. He'd told himself it was a safety protocol, that if he didn't know what was inside, he couldn't be a liability. That had always been the rule. But rules didn't prepare you for a teenage girl with frostbitten cheeks and a dead mother. He opened the first box. Inside was a reel-to-reel audio tape, labeled Echo Extract 4B, March 3, 2005. He opened the second, another tape, same format, same label variation. All 19 boxes were the same, Classified audio archives on magnetic reels, never transferred, never digitized, never acknowledged. Franklin set up an old recorder and slid in the first reel. Static. Then a voice. Male. Calm. Southern accent. This is Control. We have confirmation of rendezvous. Repeat. Subject Delta is in motion. Click. Another voice. Female. Younger. Shaky. I don't think he's alone. Something's wrong. They knew we'd be here. Click gunfire, then silence. Franklin turned off the machine. He leaned back against the cold basement wall. The cement pressed into his spine like the weight of memory. He had signed dozens of transcripts like that in his time, cleaned them up, removed mentions of location, name, emotion, sanitized versions for people in suits. But this wasn't protocol. This was a message chain, a story, a warning. He heard a creak above him. Eliza was still upstairs, likely curled under one of his wool blankets. He hadn't offered her much, just soup and a couch. But she hadn't asked for more. She hadn't cried either. That scared him more than anything. When he returned upstairs, she was staring at the fireplace. "Is she dead?" she asked. Franklin sat beside her. "I don't know, but I think someone didn't want her finishing the deliveries." She said there were always 19. She never asked why. Never looked inside. She said she wasn't supposed to know. Franklin stared at the flames. Neither was I. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, steady, and endless. Franklin couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the static from the reel-to-reel buzzed in his skull like a low-grade migraine. The voices had stayed with him, the woman's panic, the coded phrases, the sudden gunfire. They weren't just fragments of someone else's past. They were echoes of something he had helped bury. And now, someone was digging it up. By morning, Eliza was at the kitchen table, scribbling in a battered notebook. She'd made coffee without asking, using the same percolator Franklin had owned since the Gulf. He watched her for a moment, noting the precision in her handwriting, the tension in her shoulders. She reminded him of someone. Not her mother. He barely remembered Nora's face. No, it was someone further back. His niece, maybe. Or a young analyst he'd trained at Langley. Someone too smart for their own safety. "Did your mom ever say who she worked for?" he asked, sitting across from her. She just called it the agency. Never said CIA. Never used acronyms. She was careful. Eliza didn't look up. "She told me you used to be someone important," Franklin snorted. "I used to know where the pieces moved. Doesn't mean I moved them. She said you were the reason the deliveries stayed safe. That you had a system." "I had a habit," Franklin corrected. "There's a difference." Eliza slid the notebook across the table. "Then maybe you can explain this." It was a list, dates, times, all matching the deliveries. But next to every entry, her mother had written a single word. Still, storm, crow, static, fall. Some were underlined. Some had stars. One, dust, was circled 3 times. She called them moods, Eliza explained. Said every time she dropped off a package, she felt something in the air, like the air was thicker or colder. She didn't understand it either. Franklin stared at the list. These aren't moods. They're code names, operational tags. Someone was using her as a passive relay. You mean she was a... what? A signal mule? Something like that, without her knowing. They were monitoring transmission points, movement. She was carrying more than boxes. Eliza leaned back, stunned. Then why not just kill her? Because people like Nora are useful until they're not. Then they vanish. Franklin stood abruptly and headed back to the basement. This time, he opened Parcel 7. The label read, Extract 4B, November 19th, 2008, DUST. He loaded the reel and pressed play. A male voice. This one clipped, urgent. Dust phase initiated. Repeat, multiple contacts, eyes in the sky are dark. Repeat, satellite blackout, proceeding blind. Click, another voice, female again. Confirmed visual on Delta asset, he's compromised, he's bleeding. Click, gunfire, then a scream, then silence. Franklin turned off the tape and stared at his own reflection in the basement window. For years, he'd convinced himself these packages were a formality, maybe even a punishment. But now he saw the truth. They were confessions, not to him, but to someone out there, someone still listening. He heard footsteps behind him. Eliza stood in the doorway, holding an envelope. "This was inside the couch," she said. "I dropped a coin and found it shoved into the lining." Franklin opened it carefully. Inside was a Polaroid, grainy, black and white, showing 3 people in military fatigues standing outside a chopper. One of them was him. The second was a younger version of Nora. The third was a man with his face scratched out in pen. On the back, a single word: Crow. Franklin sat down, the cold chair creaking beneath him. This wasn't supposed to resurface. "Who's the man with the blacked-out face?" Eliza asked. Franklin hesitated. "Someone I thought was dead." Franklin didn't want to play the next tape. His hands hovered over the reel like it might burn him. He had seen this kind of spiral before, secrets that fed on themselves until they swallowed everything. He knew that pressing play might mean opening a door that had stayed locked for a reason. But Eliza was watching, and in her eyes he saw a question that had waited years for an answer. He loaded the tape from Parcel 13. The label read, "Extract 4B, April 21st, 2013, CROW. The static was worse this time, like someone had erased and recorded over it a dozen times. Then, faint audio. 2 men arguing. One voice was unmistakably his own. "You shouldn't be here," Franklin said, younger, angrier. "You died in Caracas," a low chuckle. "They needed me to. I've been living in the space between files ever since." "Eliza's father?" the real Franklin whispered. But Eliza said nothing. She was frozen. On the tape, the other man spoke again. "This operation, Snowbird, Echo, whatever they're calling it now, it's not about intel anymore. It's about legacy, and we're the final loose threads." Then, something chilling. The sound of a child crying, very faint, a door creaking open, then gunshots, then a thud. The tape whirred until it clicked off by itself. Franklin sat back, breathless. He didn't remember this, not entirely. He remembered the place, the room, the codes, but the child, the voices. It was like remembering someone else's dream. "Eliza," he said slowly, turning to her, "did your mother ever talk about your father?" She said he was gone, that he'd been in intelligence too. Died in the field. Did she ever say his name? No, she always changed the subject. Franklin handed her the Polaroid. "I think he's the one they erased." Eliza studied the photo. "Then why send the tapes to you?" "Because I was the last one who remembered how it started, and maybe the only one who still cared how it ended." They spent the rest of the night cataloging the boxes. Franklin opened each one, marking down dates, tags, voices. It was a map of something, somewhere. And in the last box, number 19, was a handwritten letter. The ink was faded, the handwriting unfamiliar. "If you're reading this, it means they've stopped watching, or I've stopped breathing. Either way, you need to know the truth. Project Echo wasn't about tracking enemies. It was about rewriting allies, identities, families. I was part of that. So were you." But she wasn't. Nora didn't know what she was carrying. And Eliza never should have been part of this. She's the key, not the boxes. Her. Protect her, or none of it matters. Franklin folded the letter and looked at Eliza, now half asleep on the couch, curled up beneath the same wool blanket. He had spent a lifetime guarding secrets, but maybe the most important thing he could do now was share one. Some stories are locked away for decades, waiting for the right hands to turn the key. If this one moved you, there's more to uncover. Right here on Echo Stories.